As I mentioned, we have a very exciting program, and the next set of speakers were involved in the actual formation, the vision and the formation of MDIC. The first being our current chairman of the board. Bill Hawkins is retired chairman and CEO of Medtronic, and also currently the lead director for Immucor, and as I said, most importantly, the chairman of MDIC. Not that I'm biased about that. Bill was instrumental in getting me involved in MDIC, and I think as we go through the next couple keynote speakers here, to get a context in the creation, the vision of MDIC, Bill will give the industry perspective, and then following him will be Jeff Shuren, who was a key leader in bringing the government CDRH perspective into our public-private partnership. So I will turn it over to Bill and let him speak on regulatory science and MDIC.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Bill. It's great to see so many people here, and I know we have people on the webinar as well, so welcome to all of you. And Rob, thanks very much for kicking this thing off. We actually have something in common. We're both Blue Devils, very passionate about our basketball team, which I'm counting on again this year, and we even have something to brag about now. Our football team is actually even somewhat noteworthy, although they lost us last weekend. So, so I've had the privilege of being in this industry for basically my whole career, and really picking up on something that Rob said as it relates to, how this sort of environment, this ecosystem has changed. It's pretty remarkable when you think about, where we are today versus where we were 40 years ago when I started. In fact, I started my career in 1976, about the same time that the FDA actually took jurisdiction for medical devices, so it was a good time for me, I guess. But you think about just how the era of technological and biological change has taken place, and kind of where we are today with who would have imagined 40 years ago being able to sort of sequence the human genome, or the ability to now implant tiny little sensors that can deliver real-time information that allows people to ultimately maybe modulate their behavior. And so the task that I think the government has, the FDA has, to be able to sort of evaluate risk, has gotten increasingly difficult. And as I've sort of had the privilege of working in this industry over the many years, it became apparent to me that one of the challenges that we have is rather than just be very critical of the agency for why it takes so long to get a new device approved, was this notion of the need to really find a way, in the appropriate way, to collaborate, with the industry and the FDA and academia, to look at, this whole concept of how do we manage risk. And so that's really, in essence, kind of how this whole thing came to be. So I want to just maybe give you just a brief sort of big picture view of kind of the sort of how healthcare has changed, and really in many respects how it has really led to the need, for us to have this, this privilege of being able to collaborate, with the FDA in the right way, to be able to, to work on this area of how, we can more efficiently and more effectively, deal with risk. So some of this, will be very familiar to many of you in the room, as most of all of us, are here because of our interest and passion and purpose for healthcare. But I think it's pretty well known that the healthcare industry today, is a mega industry. I mean, it represents about 20% of our GDP. It is a regulated industry, and not here only in the U.S., but it's regulated worldwide. And one of the challenges that we've faced is just this time to get innovation to the marketplace and recognize the FDA's role of both protecting but yet promoting innovation. And then, to some degree, as a consequence of the nature of our industry, and really the device industry is very different in many respects from the pharmaceutical industry, but what we've seen is that this industry has become very fragmented because, in part, what we're developing are devices, to treat, certain conditions, but maybe not broadly certain diseases, like we see in the pharmaceutical area. So when I think about just sort of big picture, what are some of the factors which are sort of changing the landscape today? I mean, we'll talk more about it, but obviously the prevalence of chronic disease. I mean, the fact that we're living now, fortunately, to our 80s and 90s, we're now dealing with neurodegenerative diseases, which in the past we didn't live long enough to really see that those were a real issue. I mean, it was more the cardiovascular disease and infectious diseases and some of the other, more communicable diseases. The aging population, which brings on the prevalence of chronic disease. Emerging market needs, I put that up there because as an industry, we've got to recognize the kind of the cultural differences and the economic differences between different nations. And the fact is that not everything that we develop and maybe our society can afford, can other countries afford. So we have to be mindful that we have to think about how can we sort of value engineer projects that could be affordable and available to people around the world. The other thing that we need to recognize is that there's many new sort of delivery models that are emerging. It's no longer just the hospital, but there are, I think, increasingly ways for us to manage patients, outside of the hospital as we develop these remote monitoring technologies. Personalized medicine. I mean, you could spend a whole morning talking about what this is really going to bring about, and certainly I think it's one of the big challenges with the FDA in terms of how do the regulators deal with this sort of this world of being able to to look at individual patients and recognize that their treatment may be different from what the next patient is, and and how do we manage that. The whole consumerism of healthcare. One of the things that I'm very excited about and passionate about is that with the advent of technology, it allows us to now maybe implant or even wear sensors that can basically provide interesting data that someone's going to aggregate and then ultimately make available to patients in a way that would help them to actually get more involved in their own health care and to modulate their behavior. I think this is going to be the next wave, but it then it brings up questions about how do you ensure that sort of transmission of data and that aggregation of data is done in a safe way such that patients are going to respond to it in the right way. Security, privacy, and then this whole concept of big data. So when you think about all of this, and you think about again with the advent and the evolution of technological change with the biological and the sort of the engineering changes and information, it's going to create some really, I think, new sort of algorithms for care and for technology that is different from what we've had to deal with in the past, and it's going to only increase the complexities of what the FDA and industry are going to have to deal with. I mean, you think about now with the advances that we're seeing in sensor technology, and now that patients can basically have a tiny little sensor that's real-time monitoring blood sugar levels, and that information is being displayed on a pump, and that patient now is directly involved in modulating their behavior by either giving themselves more insulin or not. And now we even have smart pumps where the sensors talk to the pump, and the pump actually then analyzes and then makes its own decisions. So think about the complexity there and what we're going to have to deal with in terms of ensuring that these pumps and these sensors are doing what we would expect them to do. The whole concept of, again, the molecular diagnostics. I spent the last 4 years after Medtronic, getting educated about what the opportunities are with the whole advent of next-gen sequencing and the fact that now we're going to have more information than we've ever had, and how do we deal with that? And then, again, this whole concept of big data, the fact that we're going to be generating more data than we've ever had. In fact, I've often could remark that healthcare has more data than any other industry, but probably less information. And so as a consequence, we have to think about, how can we develop means by aggregating this data to provide crisp, clear, and reliable information. So the global healthcare industry when you think about really kind of where we are, I mean, it is an industry that is predicated on innovation. I mean, it's one of the things that if you look across all of American industry, our industry, I think, really personifies, the essence of real ingenuity, invention, innovation, things that really come about to make a difference in people's lives. And the fact of the matter is that this is the industry, as Rob said, it's not about any one person. It really basically involves kind of a very much a team or a village, of people collaborating. I look back my days at Medtronic, and it may be a surprise to some that Medtronic really didn't invent very many things itself. Most everything that we did was in collaboration with the clinical community. In fact, a lot of what we did came from clinicians outside the U.S., as Rob mentioned earlier too, about the globalization. You look at defibrillators, you look at deep brain stimulation, you look at angioplasty. These were all physicians in France and Switzerland and other countries that were collaborating with engineers either in those countries or in the U.S. that really enabled to bring forward these technologies. So as you can see, the challenges that we as an industry and the FDA are facing, and this notion of how do we ensure to the public that we are being responsible and how to manage the risk, but with the complexity with personalized medicine, with sensor technologies, with information, it's become a bigger and bigger challenge. With this, there's another dimension here which we're not going to speak a lot about because the Medical Device Innovation Consortium is mostly focused, on the whole, the technology side, but we can't ignore the economics kind of healthcare and what that's doing in some respects and driving up, the cost, of bringing technologies to the marketplace. The increased prevalence of chronic disease is also creating a huge burden on society, and again, the regulatory environment. The U.S., I mean, we all know, has often been criticized, or held up as sort of as the sort of one end of the spectrum in terms of what we spend on healthcare, and that's obviously creating a lot of challenges for our country in terms of how do we balance, this idea of innovation, but with cost is being a very significant factor. Then we talked about the population trends. And so what all this really leads to is that, I mean, as we then think about, how are we, going to, move products from concept into the marketplace, and as we have this, all this new innovation that's coming forward, but yet, one of the things that Dr. Caleb spoke about, which is the need to make sure at the end of the day that what we're developing, I mean, we can basically validate, through appropriate clinical studies, that it is safe, it is effective, and now as an industry beyond the FDA, we have to also very much demonstrate that there's real value in what we do. And so, as a consequence, the cost of these trials has increased. There is now, in addition to not only the safety and effectiveness, it's the value, the cost effectiveness that we have to deal with. So all of this has really put, I think, an increasing sort of burden on our industry to be able to continue to bring forth technologies in a very timely way and to ensure that they are available for the public benefit. This is, again, just a recent article that highlights the point that I was making in terms of, that there is increasingly more requirements for evidence to ensure that products are getting to the marketplace. And one of the things that you'll hear about in one of our major focuses within MDIC is this whole area of clinical trials and how do we get the right balance between what is available and what is, how do we get more evidence for clinical studies? So, again, what we then see is there's increasingly a cost burden on our industry. And if you look at what we spend as an industry compared to just overall industries, we spend about 10%, 5 to 10% of our research, of our sales dollars on R&D. The pharmaceutical biotech spends even more than that, and that's a huge burden for an industry when you compare it to other sort of technology industries and consumer industries. So all of this has really, I think, is a good setup, for why, we had the idea of developing or putting together this public-private partnership, with the advances in technology, with the complexity of technology, with the time that it's taken to get products to the marketplace. We recognize in industry that we needed to be more responsible and more accountable ourselves, and working with, the industry and regulators, to look at how can we bring some of the tools that we have to the government, and as an end result to be able, to help them and how they are looking to manage, overall risk. Dr. Shuren will speak more to what really the regulatory science is, but in my simple way, it's really the art of how you actually manage risk. Collaboration, again, it is for us to be able, to address some of these issues that I've brought forth. We are going to need, to have more collaboration, not just with the FDA, but with academia, and even other, participants. There's a history that demonstrates that collaboration has really been, how we brought innovation to the marketplace. And if you look today, all the collaboration between healthcare providers and payers, and then going forward, I would contend that, we're now in this new era of finding ways in a responsible way to collaborate with the FDA. So in terms of who we are, Bill addressed this. We are a public-private partnership. We have created kind of this forum for collaboration and design. We are making strategic investment in regulatory science, and we're hoping to develop, and we are developing, more tools, for what industry could use to, and models that they might use to be able to get innovation to the marketplace. So if you think about medical device development, this is a very oversimplified sort of version of how you go from concept to, market. But where the MDIC comes into is really this sort of pre-competitive space where we are, working to collaborate, in advance of getting the product, to the FDA to ensure, that, we are designing the right trials and that we have the right methods of doing the benchtop testing that would ensure as we go into the FDA that these products, truly are safe and effective. Look, we talked about the fact that there are other models out there where it's demonstrated public-private partnerships are effective. If you think about where we've come from, and you'll hear more about this today, it's pretty remarkable. In the last 3.5 years, we now have almost 50 members. We have 5 key projects, and we are, we've been fortunate to be funded in many respects, by vested, interested parties, industry, and even we've been able to attract some government funding on some of the projects. And so, we are, this is something that, that is an ongoing challenge, but, so far, we've done, I think, very well. I'm not going to go through these. You're going to hear much more detail this afternoon about, the different projects that we have, but we have 5 key projects on the areas that are up here. And then, just in terms of the governance structure, we have a board of directors. I've had the privilege of chairing this for the last number of years. We were very fortunate to bring on Bill Murray as our executive director and president. And then we have, again, 50 members, and it's a little bit, it's a very interesting cross-section, as Bill indicated, not only of industry, but government partners, as well as nonprofits. And again, thank you to the Pew Foundation for their generous support and their allowing us to use, this facility. So in conclusion, really, the whole healthcare model, is changing with the advent, of technology and information, and innovation will continue to be, really what drives, at the end of the day, benefit to patients. And the challenge for us is then how do we recognize this increasing complexity, get the need, and then find the right model to collaborate, with our key stakeholders to ensure that we get the right products to the right patients at the right time. So with that, I will conclude my remarks, and Bill, I think we'll pass it on to Dr. Shuren, and then we'll do our little panel after that. So thank you very much.